that.
Back to the channel. My name is J.R. Carroll. I am the author of the More Than Human novels, and today we are here to talk about the top 10 shocking book endings. Now, some of these books are the last in a series or towards the end of the series, so I'm going to work my way around. Don't worry, no spoilers, just kind of how I anticipate that they're going to make you feel. Now, an honorable mention is my first novel, More Than a Vampire. Shocking ending, but it's not going to make the list. So let's move on to the real list. Now, number 10 is going to be Tender is the Flesh. Now, this movie is about like a dystopian future where people can no longer eat animal meat. Some kind of virus or something happened to that effect, and now we farm people. And people, it's just basically a big world of cannibalism. But it's factory farm cannibalism, and somehow that makes it even darker to me. But we have a main character, and he kind of walks us through a few, I want to say it doesn't take very long, and maybe a few weeks in his life, and he's a part of the factory farming, and we get to see the people on how they're born, how they're raised, how they're slaughtered, and he has to kind of grip and tackle his feelings on the subject of it. And not everybody is really on board, even though in this world it seems like they've been doing it for a while. Not so long that people can't remember what it was like before, but long enough that it's become a normalized thing, but people still wrestle with it. And in the end, he gets to know one of these factory farmed, factory raised people, and so he has to decide what direction he's going to go, and the author does a great job of kind of balancing out different types of feelings that this person has, and the end is just just as kind of shocking as the premise of the book itself. You're probably thinking it's going to go one way, and it just doesn't go the way you want it to go. But that's number 10. Now, number 9 is going to be Haunting Adeline. Now, this is a dark romance book, but I will submit to you that this is probably the best romance book I've ever read. H.D. Carlton is an amazing writer. This is basically a dark romance thriller, and the reason why it might be the best-selling dark romance of all time is because of the story that's within, not just the romance and the sex and all the craziness that goes along with a dark romance book. The story itself is very good. It has to do with this author, of course, is the main character, Adeline, but she kind of falls for this guy named Zaid, and it turns out that in Seattle there's a big human trafficking pedophile ring going on, and Zaid is a punisher of these people, so we'll say. And so you just have this whole relationship building through the entire book, and then right at the very end, something that you really don't see coming. Like, you're like, we kind of know how this is going to go, and it does not go that way. It does not go that way at all. A very, very different ending than what you're going to expect. Very shocking, especially for a romance novel. So let's jump in to number 8 on my list, and that is American Psycho. Now, This book is one of my favorite books of all time. Some people absolutely hate this book. They can't stand it. Um, but after a couple chapters, you get into the book, you kind of realize what type of book this is, and then you just kind of go along for the ride. One of the most disturbing books ever written, ever read. Um, but we we follow our main character, and about halfway through the book, we start realizing that maybe not everything is as it appears. Maybe he is not so much a reliable narrator. Maybe not. Um, but the very end of this book leaves you just asking all kinds of questions. Um, and that to me, that is a good book. When at the end you still have questions. And a question I have for you is, why haven't you smashed that like button yet? Hit that like button so we can get this video out to more people. Pro YouTuber. Now, number 7 on my list is the newest book in this list, and that is Leigh Bardugo's The Familiar. And this book, the book itself, it's a good story. I really like Leigh Bardugo. She's becoming one of my, favorite authors. And it's weird because I haven't read any of her main series, just her Alex Stern series, and then I've read this. So I've read 3 books by her. I liked them all. This book is really like I'm a moments person, and the ending was the moment. It is like the way this ends, and then there's like 2 emotions. It's like, what? That's kind of how I felt at the end of The Familiar. You have this woman who's kind of coming into her own, with magic, but she's trying to hide it because she's like a servant for these, not so well off nobles, and then they rope her in. I have a whole review of this, but they rope her into doing certain things, and she meets someone kind of falls in love with him, and just chaos ensues. But yes, the ending is unexpected, shocking, and it's a double whammy. It's a double whammy. But let's move on to the next one, and that is number 6, Lady of the Lake, the final book in the Witcher series. Now, this is a series that was going to have, a crazy ending. And really, this is an ending. Some people, again, this is another one of those, some people like it, some people don't. But this is an ending where you're just like, really? This is what's going to happen? This is what you're doing, Sapkowski? And it leaves some people scratching their heads, some people wiping their eyes. There's a bunch of different interpretations. If you want to watch, myself, Bryce, JC, and Byrne, my friend Nathan, we did all the books. We did live discussions for all the books. If you want to go check those out, they were super fun. And you can, if you've read them all, you can just watch the last one, and we can talk about the ending. But let's jump in to number 5, the top 5. Here we go. And this is another one, last book in the series, The Dark Tower, and The Dark Tower book, the final book. This is not so much, it's a shocking ending, but it's not shocking because, a grand thing happened, a super big climax happened. I will argue that this book really doesn't have much of a climax at all. But it's just the way Stephen King ends the book. You're just like, what? It's a head scratcher. It's a divisive ending. It's just an unexpected, weird ending. I mean, weird coming from Stephen King, of course. Now, book number 4, that is going to be City of the Dead by Brian King, the final book in the Rising. This book, he does not hold back on anything. This book is like trigger warnings through the wall. The first book was one of the I always talk about one of the most shocking books was the first book. This book's the story in this book is even better, but the ending of this book is not for the faint of heart. We'll just leave it at that. It is not for the faint of heart. It will shock you. I don't want to say too much, just in case you've only read the first book, but it's just not for the faint of heart. Now, number 3 is going to be my favorite book, probably my favorite book of all time, Changes. Now, I can't say too much about the ending because this is like book 10 or 11. But the ending of this book, as everybody tells you when you start reading the Dresden Files, it's changes, changes, changes. Wait till you get to changes. Oh my God, changes. And they're right. Everybody, my friend told me, I've told other people, I've watched other people. It's right. It's just a completely shocking ending to this book. Probably, I mean, Jim Butcher is known for his crazy endings, right? He always starts it really strong and ends it really strong. But this one is just another not for the faint of heart ending to a book that changes everything. No pun intended. But so we are now down to the final 2 books, and number 2 is going to be Stephen King's Cujo. Now, to me, Cujo is his most underrated book. Cujo, if you don't know about it, it's about a mother and a child who get stuck in a car, and there's a giant dog, Saint Bernard, I believe, outside of the car, won't let him out, tries to get into the car, and so that's the whole struggle. But Stephen King does, in this book, he does it in almost every book that I've read, especially his longer books, where he'll go off on a tangent. You'll be walking through the supermarket, and then he looks over at the cashier, and then all of a sudden we're 50 pages about the cashier's life, right? Well, he does something similar to that in Cujo. He has all like these, I think it's like 3 arcs, if I remember correctly. These 3 arcs kind of go out, and then they all come together at the very end of the book. And the ending of this book is an unexpected end. Like, what happens at the end of this book, you probably think you're mentally prepared because you always thought it was an option. You always thought that this could very well happen. It may likely happen. But then the way it happens is heart-wrenching. And it is not the way you expect it's going to happen. In fact, when you let it settle for a little bit, it's even worse than the way you thought it might happen. Yeah, Stephen King, he's not like people say he's like the worst bookender. He's a hit or miss. Like, he can be a bad ending, but it can be a Cujo ending. And that is rough. It was a very, very rough ending to that book in the best way. So before we go on to numero uno, if you haven't subscribed, you made it this far. Why don't you hit that subscribe button so you can get more of these and more author interviews and all kinds of lives that I do. So let's hit it. Number 1, the most shocking ending to a book I have ever read, that is The Wasp Factory by Ian Banks. The Wasp Factory is, I have a review up. It is about this mentally disturbed kid who also has a mentally disturbed brother, and this won't ruin anything. They tell you right at the very beginning, like in the first chapter, his brother I want to say he set a dog on fire, possibly. I don't think it was a person. I think it was a dog or something. and they put him in a mental institution. And we see from the get go that our main character, who is like, I want to say he's like 16, he also has some very disturbing things that he does, from like animal torture to like messing with bugs in certain ways, that just lends itself to to not being right. And he also, we later on learn that he's done some very bad things, right? Um, and so they have a bad relationship with their father. This is alluded to throughout the entire book. Just this back and forth of something doesn't feel right. I don't feel right. Something about me is not right. Um, and then when they get to the final chapter, and the author reveals something, and the thing about this is, like I said, I'm not going to do any spoilers, but it's out of left field. It works within the context of the book, but it's not something you're ever thinking about. It's not something you ever see coming, and that is why it is so shocking, because it affects the main character. It affects their entire life, their entire being. Everything about them is affected by this, but you never see it coming, and it's not really talked about until right at the very end of the book. And it's one of those just mind-blowing moments. But so that is the top 10 list of the most shocking book endings. Let me know, have you read any of these books? Were you as shocked as I was about some of these endings? Tell me, what is the most shocking book ending you have ever read? And remember, be more than human.